Well, it's now 5 past, so we're up to about 141 participants. We had 200 people approximately registering, and I'd very much like to welcome all those who registered and who haven't actually logged into the meeting. Also welcome those who chose to watch the meeting live on YouTube. This is the first public meeting of the Local Liaison Forum of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. We call it the LLF, and we have got the abbreviation FIP for the Infrastructure Programme. The LLF is essentially a consultation exercise with the Farnham public and the key groups which represent sections of the Farnham public, such as the Residents Associations, the Farnham Society, the Chamber of Commerce, Farnham retailers, local charities, and the Farnham Cycling Campaign. So that's what the LLF is all about. Just to introduce myself briefly, I'm actually a Surrey County Councillor for Farnham Central, and I'm also Waverley Councillor for the Moor Park Ward and Town Councillor for the Moor Park Ward in Farnham. I'm speaking here, however, as joint chairman of the Local Liaison Forum. The other joint chairman is John Neal. John actually handled the first meeting that we had with councillors. And we also have Wyatt Ramsdale as our deputy chairman, and you'll be hearing both from John Neal and Wyatt Ramsdale later. Perhaps we could bring up the agenda slide now, if we could, please. Now, briefly, the agenda, actually, there's a number of sections in this agenda. The first part of it, you'll be hearing from our MP, Jeremy Hunt, and the leaders of the councils involved. The second part, you'll be hearing from the programme team, Chris Tunstall and Paula Goff. Then there'll be a Q&A section relating to that. Then there'll be a section where Wyatt Ramsdale, assisted by a couple of our councillors, will be talking about how the LLF process is going to go forward. Finally, we'll have a general questions section. And finally, the whole meeting will be closed by Pat Evans, the Mayor of Farnham. What are our objectives for this particular meeting? Firstly, we want to explain to everybody what the programme is all about, who's involved, and what the roles are. We also want to explain how the consultation process will work. This is a new thing for us, actually. It's a bit odd to be working from home in this way, but that's the world that we now live in. A webinar like this has got a certain number of advantages, actually, over the sort of thing we've done before, which would be to invite people to a physical meeting. We can have a lot more people involved in a meeting like that, and we've got a lot of people involved. We can deal with a lot more questions, some of which we'll answer during the meeting, some of which will be answered later. There's a number of disadvantages of a webinar. The main thing is that this technology can actually go wrong. I've been involved in quite a few of these web type meetings, and occasionally somebody gets disconnected, occasionally even the chairman. It's just something you have to deal with. If I happen to be disconnected, John Neal will take over and run the meeting. If John is disconnected, Wyatt will do it. So that's the disadvantage of a meeting like this, but it's got advantages as well. Another thing I'd like to say that I mentioned the objectives, but there's overall objectives that we have towards this meeting and the whole LLF project. We want to create an atmosphere of goodwill towards this project. It's a very, very important project for Farnham. We all know what Farnham's problems are, actually. They're mainly connected with the traffic in the town centre and the consequent air pollution. And this is something that everybody in Farnham has been concerned about for many years. We've finally got a project that's going to tackle this sort of thing, so it's a very important project for Farnham. But it won't work without public support, and people need to feel they've been listened to, and that's what we're trying to achieve in this project. Now, I'll now get on to introducing our first set of speakers, or our first speaker. The first speaker is Jeremy Hunt, actually. The thing I want to say in putting what Jeremy's contribution to this in context is that many, very many people contributed to where we've got so far in this project. There's been many people such as the local architects, people like Max Lyons, Jim Duffy, Mark Westcott, Michael and Damien Bloor, and the whole Farnham Recrafting group. So it's been contributed by a whole load of people, including people from all the political groups in Farnham. I won't name all the particular councillors involved, but many Conservative, many Farnham residents, many Lib Dem people have contributed towards this. But I have to say that Jeremy's played a very important role in all of this since he launched a referendum into town centre pedestrianisation in 2013. That's quite a while ago, and Jeremy's had many setbacks actually in trying to actually get it, his initial ideas turned into a project. And we're finally there now, actually. I won't go through all the setbacks we've had down the line, but the thing that really brought the whole thing to a head actually is that after an air pollution summit which took place last year, nothing much seemed to happen for a few months, and the Farnham Herald eventually published an article in January saying, addressing it to all councillors, you're all talk. And the outcome of that is Jeremy got a group of people together, including the Farnham Surrey councillors, including the Farnham Society, including the Chamber of Commerce. And we all wrote a joint letter to Tim Oliver and John Ward, the leaders of Surrey and of Waverley, saying we've really got to do something about this. We can't be accused of being all talk. And they actually responded. In fact, what's happened has been the setting up of this project, in fact. So I'll now pass to Jeremy to talk to us for about 3 or 4 minutes and his perception of what's happened and what the project's going to lead to. So over to you now, Jeremy.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy, and good evening, everyone. And I also want to thank you for the great commitment that you've shown to this agenda, from ever since I first started getting to know you, and also to Chris Tunstall and Paula Goff who are in the Surrey County Council team, who've been really doing the legwork, and also to the Farnham Herald, who've been championing this. I think many of the several hundred people who have tuned in this evening will have one question on their mind, which is, why is it going to be different this time? We've been talking about this for so long. You're absolutely right, Andy. I've had enormous numbers of personal setbacks trying to push this agenda forward. But I do think there are 3 things that are just different this time, and which is why it's a very unique moment. The first is that we have a consensus that stretches right the way through the 3 councils which have responsibility for Farnham, to key groups like the Farnham Society, the cyclist campaigners, the anti-pollution campaigners. There is a consensus that we have frankly not had before. And I do particularly want to thank the 3 council leaders, Tim Oliver, John Ward and John Neal, because if there's one thing I've learned over the last decade of campaigning on this issue, it is that if any one council wants to go slow on this, they can basically kill the whole thing off. And so having that consensus of the 3 councils is very, very important, and we just haven't had that before. Secondly, I think it's really encouraging that it stretches across the political spectrum, and that we have John Ward from the Farnham residents, John Neal from the Farnham residents, you, Andy, from the residents, me on the Conservative side, Paul Follows on the Lib Dem side. And that I think is really important, because if we're going to do this, this is going to be a 20-25-year project. We're not going to do all of this in the next 2 years. There's some very big ticket numbers here. And we need to give people confidence that this will survive changes in political leadership over that period. And the final thing that I think is different is frankly coronavirus, which I think it's been a horrific tragedy for the country, but it's also created an atmosphere where people just feel we're going to come back after this pandemic and we're going to do things differently. And one of the things that we want to do differently is our town centres, as we work to improve social distancing. We've noticed how much nicer it is having less pollution, and people don't want to go back to how they were before. So I just want to say, I think 3 ingredients for success going forward. The first is everyone has got their own strong views. Which of the many projects that are involved in this matter the most? Is it Bracklesham Relief Road, Western Bypass, Hickley's Corner, the transformation of the town centre, Upper Hale? And everyone has got their own view on what needs to happen in Farnham Town Centre. And we have all got to be prepared to compromise. So I've long wanted us to pedestrianise the centre of Farnham, like they've done in Guildford very successfully, and in Godalming very successfully, and Petersfield very successfully. But I am not going to hang my hat on any mast until we've seen those traffic studies. And I'm very aware that I will have to make compromises in terms of my own personal vision as to what I like to see in the centre of Farnham when we see those traffic studies. And we're all, frankly, going to have to make compromises on what would be ideal in order to carry that consensus that is so important. Secondly, I think we've got to be very honest with people about the challenges involved. Some of these schemes, Bracklesham Relief Road is 50 million plus, Hickley's Corner is 100 million plus, the town centre is probably between 10 and 20 million. These are big sums of money which we haven't raised yet. And the reason that we're starting this way round, it's not cart before the horse. We won't get people to back these schemes financially until they can see it's part of a big plan to really transform Farnham Town Centre. But we have to be honest with people about the challenges that we still have. And the third thing that will make this a success is if we have real ambition to make this a huge turning point. And I think that there is an enormous desire amongst the people who live in Farnham to try and do something that allows it to live up to its potential. It already has some of the best architecture of any town in the southeast, but we just spoil that incredible potential because we allow it to be dominated by traffic, pollution, fumes. And I think what we all want is a green town, a much greener town, something that is more family friendly, something that allows people to get around by ways other than a car, and something that basically allows us to bring back a sense of community into the very heart of Farnham, because that's its great advantage with those beautiful streets. You could really strengthen that sense of community that could allow it to unleash its potential. So that's what we're aiming for. I think that's why we've got such a huge turnout for this evening's call. Thank you all for taking part, and I stand ready to play my part in finally making this happen. Thanks very much, Andy.
Thanks very much for that, Jeremy. Our next speaker is Colin Kemp, the Deputy Leader of Surrey. Tim Oliver, who's the leader, sent his apologies. He can't make it this evening, but Colin will be a very able speaker for us, and that Colin and Tim very much act as a leadership team at Surrey. They've been in power, if you like, or they've had responsibility for something like 2 years or so. And although I'm an opposition member at Surrey, they've actually certainly done a lot to improve Surrey over the previous leadership, but that actually is not a great compliment. I didn't think all that much of the previous leadership. But another thing I should say about Colin for people's information is Colin actually did suffer rather badly from the virus, and he even had to go in hospital, and therefore he's still suffering occasionally from headaches and things, and he said that he won't be able to stay for the whole of this meeting, and that's totally understandable. In terms of Colin and Tim as a team, Tim is very much the front man, the chairman type person. Colin's reputation very much is for the guy who gets things done, actually. He's the power behind the throne, if you like. My Farnham resident colleague and fellow councillor, Stephen Spence, describes Colin as his favourite Tory, in fact. And Stephen doesn't have any favourite Tories, I have to tell you. So over to you now, Colin, if you can tell us how you see it from Surrey's point of view.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for the introduction. And Stephen, I'm not sure Stephen does my career any good when he keeps saying that I'm his favourite Tory. People get worried about that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Colin Kemp. As has been said, I'm the Deputy Leader at Surrey County Council. And as previously said, apologies from Tim Oliver, who is actually away at the moment with his family. The infrastructure and air quality issues in and around Farnham have been talked about for a long time, and I'm pleased to see at last that there is some positive action, and it feels really positive. By all parties working together. This is not about politics, but this is about people and people coming together to deliver outcomes. All of them working together to identify a way forward and meeting some of the challenges that lay before us, both in terms of engaging with all the different businesses and resident groups to identify the challenges that are in and around Farnham and looking at the possible solutions so we can try and find a way forward. I'd like to start by thanking Jeremy, and it has been said already, but as previously mentioned, you know, the possible solutions and outcomes, and this has been talked about for many, many years. And Jeremy has been the real driving force that has brought everyone together and got them around the table to start this piece of work. So I think Jeremy deserves a hands up for that work and actually bringing everyone together. So thank you for that, Jeremy. The work that he's doing around Farnham is both short, medium and long term. There will be quick wins, small projects and larger projects such as Hickley's Corner and the Recklesham Bypass that will need to be considered. But the important thing is that they are designed together and make sure they have a joined up approach to the solutions in the area. The work is not just about cars, but it's about people, it's about cycling, it's about walking, public transport, all these things being taken into account, and what the residents want and what the local businesses need to survive and for the future of Farnham. The Local Liaison Forum, or LLF, is the first stage of this process, led by Andy, John and Wyatt, who represent the 3 local authorities of Surrey, Waverley and Farnham, will engage with the local community to understand the issues that affect the people of Farnham on a daily basis, what possible solutions they feel would improve life for the residents of Farnham, and feed that into the centre. Surrey County Council has put in place a project manager and a lead officer to support of this group, and will start to pull together the views that the LLF collects from all the different groups in Farnham. We are aware that there's been lots of studies done in the past, but and a lot of keen work that has gone on before, but we must have all this work joined up. So all the previous stuff that has been done has been fed into the central system. It needs to be updated and we need to look at what's going on going forward. But they will all be fed into the central design team led by the project manager, who will start to scope out outcomes of the project. And all these outcomes will be evidence-based, and that's the important thing. Jeremy talked about the local traffic modelling, etc. We must put evidence-base behind it to make sure it is joined together and we get the correct outcomes for Farnham and its communities. While this work is going on, the Farnham board, along with the project team, along with the local councillors, will be looking for things that can be done in the near future, but making sure that these do not have impacts on the larger plans or unintended consequences in other parts of Farnham, just shifting the problems around. So this is a really coordinated piece of work, both in short-term fixes, medium-term projects and long-term projects like Recklesham and Hickley's Corner. Happy to take some questions. As I say, I will be here for about another 3/4 an hour or so. But any questions that are emailed in for me, I'm happy to respond to later. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much, Colin. Anyone who wants to address a question to Colin can do it through the Q&A box, and Colin can answer through that as well. Or if it's a more complicated question you prefer to answer by email letter, you can do that as well. Our next speaker is John Ward. John Ward is the leader of Waverley Borough Council. He's also a leader of the Farnham Residents Group that I happen to be a member of. John is also a town councillor and an ex-mayor of Farnham, actually. The thing it's much easier for me to heap praise on John than the previous speakers who aren't the same member of a political group. But it's certainly the case that John has been extremely supportive of this project. He's managed to pull together not just him, but the leadership team. There's also a leadership team at Waverley consisting of John Ward and Paul Follows, who's a Lib Dem as deputy leader. They've managed to pull together a multi-party executive, which has got Farnham residents on it, Lib Dems, It's also got representatives of the Labour Party, Green Party and an Independent. So we're very much a multi-party executive at Waverley, and we've got support from all of these groups to support this project. Paul, of course, is a Godalming councillor as well as being deputy leader at Waverley, but he's giving full support to the project. So I've now passed to John to have his say in how he views the project.
Thank you, Andy. Well, it's hard to follow so much detail of what's going on, but let me emphasize a few points. As you say, I'm currently the leader of Waverley, and for some time I was the leader of Farnham. And during that leadership, I was so frustrated with not being able to get things done by the councils higher up the scale. And when I was asked some time ago to give a presentation on how my life had gone and what I'd done with my life, someone said to me, "What would you call it?" And I said I would call it timing, because timing is really what's vital here. The time now is absolutely right, because we have the right people in the right places. We have new leaders at all three, county, borough and town. We have different control in borough, which is conservative, in borough, which is multi-party, county, which is conservative, and Farnham Town Council, which is Farnham residents controlled. So that all those people could get together, I think it is a praise indeed for having the right people in the right places. And people that haven't been mentioned much are Chris and Paula, who are the two, again, new officers in Surrey. I've been very impressed with their dedication, their ability to grasp the facts, their knowledge, and their keenness to get on with it. And I have for a long time been a critic of things that the county does, but in this particular respect, they got the right people, they've got them in the right place at the right time. And I think there is a definite move forward by all three counties, all three councils, to listen to the people. And listening to the people is really, really what it's all about. At Waverley, we had a people's panel not long ago where there was a particular thing that we wanted the people to come and talk to us about, and we invited people in the same way as this, which is effectively a people's consultation, to really find out what people wanted. This is what's been missing for years and years and years, and I know from experience as a leader of Farnham, we have felt put upon, people were sometimes less polite than that, from a great height by those above us. And for once, we have this time where our leaders are getting on with each other. And that actually really matters, because if the leaders get on, then hopefully they can persuade the rest of the council to get behind them. But certainly if the leaders don't get on, then it will never work. So I think we have the right people in the right place at the right time. And I hope that everybody listening takes heart from this, that in answer to one of Andy's earlier questions, will this work? Or it's possibly even Jeremy's, yes, it will, because the will to make it work is there. Thank everybody for listening into this. I've had a quick look at some of the questions, and they are very perceptive. They are good questions, which I'm sure will be properly answered. But when you leave here, tell your friends about it. Get them interested. Get letters, emails, and things flooding into us, because the last thing we want is to move forward on a project that doesn't have the support of the people. And the support of the people is utterly vital. Thank you, Andy. I think that's enough from me.
Thanks very much, John. And it's really good that we're getting a consistent message from all of the leaders so far. The next speaker I'm going to introduce is John Neal. As I said earlier, John is actually one of the joint chairmen of the LLF, but today he's speaking as leader of Farnham Town Council. which is a really important role. John also happens to be a Waverley councillor, but his role here and a really important role is as leader of Farnham Town Council. I've known John for many years actually, long before he was a councillor, but even long before I was a councillor. And John's shown a great interest in trying to improve Farnham for many, many years. When I spoke to him about why he was so interested, it turned out that his father was actually a town planner many, many years ago. John's career wasn't in town planning, it's largely been in IT like myself, but he's nevertheless got a great interest come down from his father. So I'll now pass to John to have his say. Over to you now, John.
Thank you very much, Andy. And hello, everybody. It's great to see so many people here with us tonight. So to me, this is a very exciting time for Farnham. For the first time, as other people have said, we've got the 3 councils that manage the town all coming together. And we're not just going to do another study, which we've seen before, but actually put in place a build programme. So that programme will produce proposals that we expect to take forward and create long overdue changes. We expect out of this to define a revitalised town centre, together with some radical changes to the major roads. And this will all be directed to create a new community and retail centre in the town, and the changes to the roads will be designed to improve the connectivity of our neighbourhoods. So we are taking a really holistic approach to all this. And, we want to make sure we look at all the road problems, whilst at the same time trying to solve the town centre congestion and pollution and things like that. And still at the same time trying to move the long distance traffic around the town, which we obviously need to do. So it's not going to be easy to find the best solutions, but we will ask you to bear with us while the project engineers come up to the proposals that come out of all the consultation that's going to be going on. Now, we want to be forward looking about all this as well. We are going to consider pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, bus travel in the way that is right for our time. Taking on board health and fitness, climate change, pollution, and all the post-COVID problems. So we want to make sure we capture also the best of current experience around the country, all with the aim of producing and making this great Surrey town. We have a very special town here with an amazing heritage, and we must make sure we retain the best of the current in a modern context. So just to summarise, the key outcomes I think we're looking for are: 1, an improved town centre where people can move around easily and enjoy a modern community-focused space. 2, plans to upgrade the major roads so that they can move the traffic around the town with less impact on our residents. And 3, within the roads projects, to improve the connectivity between the town centre and all our neighbourhoods, whether we are walking, cycling, driving, or on the buses. So that's going to be a long shopping list, and it's what you'll be hearing more about tonight. So to me, it's important that everyone in Farnham gets a say. I'm very conscious that most of the councillors and people that speak up for Farnham tend to be from the older generation. It's inevitable. It is quite likely that tonight's audience is also weighted in that direction. But when I speak to people of working age, to parents with young children, I know they all have their ideas. They pass them over to me and say, try and remember to bring that in as well. Sometimes they're just too busy to get involved. So we are determined here to find a way to reach out to them, and so that we create a town that is fit for us all. And we really do want to get everybody involved, wherever they're coming from. So tonight's event is just an introduction. We will be setting up many sessions to address all the particular subjects one by one. So please keep in touch with us and feed in your ideas. Lots of people have already contacted me and other members of our team here. So please feel free to call me up if you want to discuss the project as we go along. And we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, John. The next section of the agenda is you're now going to hear from 2 professionals. the people we heard from so far were all councillors. We've all got strong opinions about what should happen in central Farnham and Farnham as a whole. But at the end of the day, we're not we're not traffic professionals. We're amateurs, if you like. We need professionals like Chris Tunstall and Paula Goff, who you're going to be hearing from. And I point out that Surrey have made quite an investment in Farnham in terms of employing people like Chris and Paula. They're putting quite a lot of money into the project. And you'll hear from Chris about what the sorts of sums of money that would be necessary to deliver the whole thing. But up front, even, it costs quite a lot of money to get the project as far as we've done already. Farnham's a very, very important town in Surrey. We're the third biggest, or one of the next biggest towns after Guildford and Woking. But we're still only 40,000 people out of 1.2 million. So people like Tim and so on have got a big job looking after the whole of Surrey, but they're nevertheless spending a great deal of time, Tim and Colin, on Farnham right now. Part of the background to that is that Surrey have invested in the Brightwells project. So it's very, very important to Surrey that we sort out the roads as well, because that's necessary to make the Brightwells project work, actually. So that's the background to the employment of Chris and Paula. So I'll now pass over to Chris and Paula to deal with the next section. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for that, Andy. Can we have the next slide? The slide after that, please. Right. Thank you. Okay. Just before I get on to these, thank you very much for the introductions. Not much pressure then. But just to give you an idea, we've had one question about the governance, and you've seen the key people on the board. In addition to those people, we've got Councillor Paul Fellows, who's the deputy leader at Waverley. We've got Wyatt Ramsdale, we've got Stephen Spence, and obviously the leaders. The question was, has this got teeth or is it a talking shop? And I honestly, I mean, I've had a number of years in local government, too many to mention, and my last piece of work was at Cambridge, which was very similar to what we're trying to do here, albeit it was a bigger area and bigger town, but less actually money. And that did not have the power of the board that we have here. So I've not worked with a situation where we've got so many high-powered people. So I think the answer to Simon's question is it teeth, or has it got teeth, or is it a talking shop? From my point of view, it has teeth. And just to give you an indication, we've appointed the core team. Paula, who's been mentioned, is from Arcadis. She's the programme manager. I'm the programme director to try and pull it all together. We've got Atkins, who are the designer, and so far we've also got, and this was just for quarter one, quarter two, Surrey has invested 400,000, so I can engage all these people. One of the areas that we are looking at the moment, I'll come on to the projects in a second, but in terms of future works, we're doing, and I am sorry for some of the terminology, because it is tech terminology that actually, I know it leaves people cold, but we are looking for an infrastructure plan. Why is it optimised? We've had a question asked, no one's mentioned climate change. Actually, the reason it's optimised is because we are doing a zero carbon exercise for Farnham for the infrastructure. This is a major issue. We have declared emergency climate change plans. So we are starting from the basic premise that whatever we do, we are looking to reduce carbon, and if at all possible, to do it to net zero. And that will actually throw schemes out of it that will help achieve that. Hickley's Corner. Hickley's Corner is a scheme that's been around for many years, since 2004. We've commissioned a piece of work again with Atkins to review that. The issue is that 2004 scheme just isn't suitable for a 2020 scheme. If for no other reason, from a carbon perspective and from a connectivity perspective, because the old scheme was very much move the traffic along the A31, bring the local traffic up to a roundabout, so an underpass for the A31, and then it wasn't controlled. So if you were a pedestrian, if you were a, oh, that's interesting, not that sort of pedestrian. If you were a pedestrian or if you were a cyclist, you had to take your chance with the traffic. The way around that was to traffic signal it. But what we want to do is start from the premise of making the connectivity between South Farnham and the station and North Farnham and the town centre a link that works for Farnham, not a link that works for the A31. The caveat to that is, of course, we need government money, and government money will want to see the A31 working well. We have also commissioned some work for a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which will be looking at what we can implement within Farnham to improve cycling and walking. In addition to that, we're making a bid as part of the government's tranche 2 work in terms of COVID. So it's the COVID recovery, it's the walking and cycling, the active travel. We're making a bid on that. The county's notional amount, but it is a bid process, so we're not guaranteed it, is 6.8 million. And we are looking to put a bid in as one of 5 bids for Farnham, and we've been working with the Farnham cycling campaign on that. And a very thorny subject, HGVs. I actually came down to Farnham, and what I should have also mentioned in the governments, you've got Tom Horwood, you've got Ian Lynch, and you've got Katie Stewart. You can't get much more senior than that from the partner authorities. So when I came down to Farnham, I met with Tom, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I hadn't really seen anything like it. In fact, I can't remember when I did see something like it. The amount of HGVs, the amount of traffic, and I was just flabbergasted. So when this opportunity came up to actually act as programme director for Farnham, that was just absolutely superb for me, because I knew we could make a difference. With HGVs, I know there is a lot of concern about that, and I know people want to see action now on it. Unfortunately, it's like a lot of things, there are processes to follow. What we did do to start with, as part of the COVID works, we actually tried to put advisory signs up. We're checking those advisory signs. We are speaking to the police with a view to trying to advise drivers that this was not the way through for them. We have worked with Farnham, and we've got the cameras fully up and running. So we are working on that, and we have commissioned, again with Atkins, work to actually look at HGVs and trying to get HGVs out of the centre. The one thing I've got to be careful of is the HGVs don't appear somewhere else, that we don't want them to appear, because I'm sure that everybody will be very happy for the HGVs to disappear out of the town centre, but won't be very happy if they appeared outside their individual houses when they're rerouted somewhere else. So we've got to get an alternative route, and that piece of work is something we're doing, and it is something we're doing urgently. Can we have the next slide, please? So we've split Farnham into 4 projects. What we call Project 1, the short and medium term improvements, Farnham Town Centre improvements, Hickley's Corner, and Recklesham Relief Road, Recklesham Bypass. In terms of, someone's asked, are there priorities based on money? No, they're not based on money, but there is a logic that says on some of these schemes, they're very expensive. Jeremy's identified the cost of Hickley's over 100 million. Recklesham, even Surrey can't afford to pay for those. So we have to go to government. There is grant available, but we have to meet their requirements as well. So, you know, there's no priority. Someone else has asked, have we already made decisions? Because you've got these projects. What these are, we know there are issues there. I don't think anybody would disagree that there aren't issues around Farnham Town Centre, around Hicklis Corner and around Recklesham. What we haven't got, we've no preconceived ideas about how we can resolve those. We've got the issues, and part of the process now is to consult with you all as to what people feel are the best proposals that we can go forward with. So in terms of the short and medium term improvements, we are looking at HGV ban. We have to go through a process. We have to try and ensure, and when I say an HGV ban, you cannot just ban HGVs. You can ban vehicles up to, over a certain tonnage, you can ban vehicles over a certain length, you can ban vehicles over a certain height, but you can't put a blanket ban on HGVs and allow for access only. So we've got to work through that. We are also looking at 20 mile per hour. We've put advisory signs on as part of the 20 mile per hour, as part of the COVID works that we've implemented. And someone's asked the question about Castle Street, and you know, can we look at the 20 mile per hour on Castle Street? There is a 20 mile per hour, but it only starts at the COVID works. I will look at moving the advisory beyond that. And again, we will ask the police, it is only advisory though, we will ask the police to attend, we're in the process of that now, to do some speed checks, or even with the Farnham Town Council, because they have trained people as well. So those are the quick wins. And as I say, we've also made this bid, or making this bid, through to government. So those are the sort of quick wins that we're looking at. Farnham Town Centre, well, we're looking at all sorts of issues there, and we will come out and consult on those. We've nothing in the running at the moment. We do know we need to widen footways. We do know that some areas, the impact of traffic and obviously HGVs are a major issue. So we are looking at that. Hicklis Corner, as I say, we have commissioned some work because what we've already done isn't going to be right for 2020. It's 16 years old. And Recklesham Relief Road, we need to do work on that as well. Questions being raised about Western Bypass. So is that off the table? The answer is no. Nothing's off the table. Everything's on the table. Nothing's been decided. Everything's up for decision. We will help and advise from a technical point of view, but nothing's been decided. But obviously, you've got to have some structure to it. So hopefully that will assure people that, you know, there's no Machiavellian ploy here, that we have a plan just under the table that we can put on the table again. Yes, lots of studies have been done. Yes, lots of work has been done by groups within Farnham, and we welcome that work, and we will engage with them on that work, and we'll look to involve that work in our thoughts and iterations. So, as I say, very happy to work with a number of groups within Farnham, and we are already doing so. We've already had meetings with stakeholders. Can I have the next slide, please? So that brings us on to the draft vision, and I'll hand over to Paula in a second, but can I just say the intent was that we would have the draft vision out by now so people could be looking at it. The vision just identifies what we perceive the issues to be, having reviewed all the documentation, having talked to the key stakeholders, and we've listed those down. And Paula will go through that. We will be publishing that. It is only a draft. But again, my plea is we have to start with something. We can't start with a total blank sheet of paper. I've been there before, that people will then say, well, so what is your vision for Farnham? Where are we going with this? We need something to work with, but please don't take it that this is actually a fait accompli that we've already decided. It could not be further from the truth. And I know I speak totally, even as an officer, from the board's point of view with this. So if I could hand over to Paula.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. My name is Paula Goff. I work for Arcadis. I'm a project director within our highways consultancy team. For the purposes of this scheme, I'm the program manager, and under Chris's direction, I will be acting as the engine room to make things happen for this program. You've already heard so much about what we're trying to achieve here. So I would like to use my slot to give you a bit of a feel and flavor of the vision that we've created and the sort of themes to our vision. As one of our key achievement in all of this will be creating sort of good dialogue with the people to make sure that the solutions we're creating are the solutions and what the people of Farnham actually want. So we will be basing this vision as a sort of the baseline foundation to how we will take the project forward. And like Chris has said, it will evolve as we uncover more and more information. On the slide that's currently up, you see what the various steps that we've followed so far. So when I was engaged in March, we began extensive stakeholder consultation with both, starting with the board members and key councillors around Farnham. We have reviewed a huge number of historic documentation. As many people will know, this project has been on the books for a long period of time, and we wanted to understand the general background and the drivers behind the program. We then created a sort of a wants list, if you like, and on the basis of that, we wrote this draft vision statement, which effectively shares with the reader how the program's come about, what it's trying to solve, and how we see going about achieving that. Once we've finalized the vision and shared it with you, we're going to create an optimized infrastructure plan. And that is what it says on the tin. It's an infrastructure plan that has been optimized both against our vision and what is an investable program for delivery, but also optimized against the needs of Farnham as a town. It's both its infrastructure needs, but needs of its communities, and also the achievement of the climate emergency and the sustainable credentials that we need to have in order to apply for the funding from government that Chris mentioned earlier. We will then create an execution plan, which is what we call a blueprint. And through that, we will share how we're going to go about delivering each of the projects that is under the program umbrella. You've already seen we've identified 4 existing projects. And as Chris explained, they will be evolving. We might end up calling Recolshan Bypass the Western Bypass, the Western Gateway, because we may decide that actually that's a more sustainable solution. But we will come to that as we uncover more and more information and we start to articulate our business case for the funding we'll be applying to. Once we've done that, we will be going to the market and commissioning various consultants. Atkins have been are the framework consultant for Surrey County Council, so they've been selected to do the design, and together with options and feasibility design, as well as an emerging business case, we will go out there, seek further formal public consultations with you, and then apply to government for the funding to then go ahead and deliver the scheme. Next slide, please. So the green box shares a single shared vision that 3 councils have been agreed to be the vision for this program. So our vision as the Farnham Infrastructure Programme is to deliver a well-integrated, future-focused, high-quality infrastructure solution for Farnham that enables a connected and vibrant town where people choose to live, work, study, and spend their leisure time in sustainable ways. So that's effectively our guiding light. That's the state of the future that we'd like to achieve as part of our programme. Next slide, please. This, in order to begin to look at what we need to consider, because there's, for example, a lot of developments emerging in East Hampshire, in Aldershot, in various areas within Waverley, all of which will have an impact on Farnham and its surrounding areas. We've had to draw a starting red line boundary of where we're looking at to inform how we need to design the various projects within our programme. This is currently the approximate red line boundary that we've created in order to inform that optimized plan we talked about for Farnham. As you can see, it's quite a big area, and therefore we need to do quite a lot of work to understand the emerging developments and the various projects that are going to have an impact, to make sure that what we create is sustainable for the future and is going to serve both what we currently have and what we aspire to have. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. The emerging vision statement was written, and a number of key themes emerged from this. So this diagram is showing what our key themes will be, which we will enable as part of the optimized infrastructure plan. And the themes are prioritizing safety and well-being, and I think the next slide has a larger image. So if we go to the next slide, and that's a bit clearer. Enhancing mobility and connectivity, acting to respond to climate emergency, placing communities first, supporting businesses and encouraging economic growth, and capturing and enabling digital technology. If I can give just a brief example of some of these, I haven't got the time to go into the detail, but very happy to hear everybody's thoughts on how you think this sits in terms of the public view of these themes. So prioritizing health and safety, we're talking about prioritizing well-being of non-motorized users, that's pedestrians, cyclists, walkers. That is enabling more children and more people to walk to school. That is ensuring that people can safely walk around, for example, with widening the length of the width of the pedestrian walkways, and ensuring that everybody can be safe in their journeys in Farnham. Enhancing mobility and connectivity. So that's about creating hubs that are well connected. That is not just roads, that's around business hubs, that's around, for example, cycling and walking routes that are placed where the people want them, that go past various schools, that are connecting to various businesses to encourage more and more people to take up that activity. That is both because that is what the people want, but also it is a criteria the government have out there in terms of increasing walking, doubling walking, for example, and also, for example, getting 55% of 5 to 10-year-olds walking or cycling to school within the next 10 years. So we, as part of our aspirations, we need to put that as a metric for our project and act to enable it. Acting to respond to climate emergency has already been mentioned by Colin. Climate emergency declaration has been placed by all 3 councils. There are several environmental metrics that all councils would like to achieve, and we're going to champion that through our programme. In fact, when I was introduced to this project, Tim Oliver told me that he wanted to see this programme as being exemplar in terms of the council responses to climate emergency, and in terms of the council response in placing communities first and the community needs first, that being around environmental, enhancing the environment, reducing noise and air quality, enabling employment, tapping into the excellent educational facilities in Farnham and enhancing and enabling access to those, and helping communities access the excellent countryside that is around Farnham and the connections to London and the jobs outside the area. And then finally, supporting businesses and encouraging economic growth. We want to make sure that the connectivity and mobility solution that we have is connecting the new emerging developments such as Brightwells and Woolmead very well to the existing town centre, ensuring that they both thrive and that Farnham becomes a hub for other businesses. So we will be engaging with them to make sure that what we're providing will enable them to thrive. And then finally, in capturing and enabling digital technology, electric vehicle charging is the immediate area for consideration. Electric buses is another consideration for Farnham. So what we will be producing hopefully will be future-proofed for being able to integrate all of that technology in the future. And the next slide, please. Oh, that's it. So back to you, Andy.
Thanks very much, Paula. In terms of question and answers, we've got a general question and answer section towards the end of the agenda. So I think the best thing is if we try to stick to our timetable, and we'll go on to the next section, which is being run by Wyatt Ramsdale. Wyatt, as I said earlier, is part of the team running the LLF with John and myself. And what Wyatt's going to be talking about, how we want to take this consultation process forward. So I'll pass over to Wyatt now. Over to you, Wyatt.
Andy, thank you very much. And good evening, everybody. So we've been talking about how the project's run overall, the funding of it, and in particular, people have been raising issues about how do we capture all of the views. Well, that's what this local liaison forum, of which tonight is a part, but ongoing will be contributing to, is all about. Now, this is the how part of this effectively. And please be assured, these decisions have not already been made. Yes, we're making start planning on the basis of 4 projects, but we can add more, and certainly these things are not being ignored. Next slide, please. Sorry. The formality of the local liaison forum has been approved by the board. It's led by board members who are local councillors, but we'll also be able to adopt more people into the teams as the needs are identified. The LLF is co-chaired by Andy and John, both of whom you've met in the presentation so far, and I'm the one vice chairman. I guess that means I do much of the legwork. This meeting is being recorded. I think it's been shared in the Q&A that assuming everything goes well, and this is our first attempt at such a large meeting, that will be shared early next week, I imagine by all 3 councils. Certainly I know the town council have committed to it. And absolutely this is your opportunity to ask questions and participate. Now, yes, we're having to constrain it to written questions so that we don't get, some people are inclined to give us half an hour of opinion before we get a question. And therefore we're trying to get it so that everybody has a fair slice. And apologies to anybody who finds their question isn't answered tonight, but they will be followed up on and answered in writing. So this LLF is a conduit through which you'll see project developments and the decisions being reported, being put out to you to discuss, to think about, give us feedback. We want those comments coming back, typically regarding design, which I think is where we'll get most of the feedback. But also at this early stage, we want local issues, local opportunities regarding the highways and the infrastructure that we're trying to deal with. And this is involvement from the start. There's no predetermination here, and it absolutely is the opportunity for you all to add, your 10 pence worth. And certainly we've seen a number of people pressing for the Western bypass, although I see an immediacy in the need for the Recklesham bypass, which can then link up to a Western bypass in the future. Let me move on to the next slide. So in summary, this local liaison forum and all of the forums going forward will be meetings in public. Any and all issues can be considered, and there will be time for your concerns, your questions and the answers. Apologies to anybody who's expected to see solutions tonight. What we're discussing is how the forum will work and how we'll be collecting ideas going forward. As and when necessary, we'll be looking to have probably one-off meetings to look at particular issues. They might be organised on a geographic or location basis, perhaps by the different divisions of the 3 county councillors. They might be organised on a topic or a specific issue, such as safety in the centre of Farnham for both cyclists and pedestrians. Or maybe we'll be starting to look at specific projects, and therefore people with that particular interest will want to come in and look at them in particular. Maybe it's the A31, maybe it's the Upper Hale Road, or close to my own heart, the importance of the A325. Or perhaps it'll be looking at something that affects a particular interest group. Maybe it'll be something for the residents associations, and in fact you might see that list, that name on the list that's up here now. Now, in the short term, relative to this project, we're looking to have a number of events happen. 7 suggestions, which I personally would like to see happen, and has some support amongst my colleagues, are the following that are identified. We want to have an event that's looking at the walking, cycling and driving issues in the town centre. Obviously, there's a bit of a conflict. There's only so much roadway to put the cars, to put the cyclists, and to have perhaps more space for pedestrians. We need to look at the opportunities, issues and the risks from what we're doing for the businesses in Farnham, both retail and offices. And that needs to be something specific. There's particular issues regarding the A325 in Recklesham. We talked about the bypass, but there's also the road itself and maybe some short-term things and concerns that we need to address. Some of you in the Q&A have talked about the issue of the traffic across the north of Farnham, how traffic leaves the M3 at Odium to cut across sooner, probably gets to the top of Folly Hill and has that decision as to whether they come down Castle Street or Upper Hale Road. Well, neither's acceptable. And if we do something to one or the other, we've got to think about those unintended consequences that could follow on. Now, many of the speakers today, so far this evening, have been a bit like me, typically in a grey suit, certainly with grey hair, and typically over 60, and are local councillors. Well, we're trying to broaden that. So we're going to have at least one of the sessions looking at the requirements for the younger generation, and perhaps as well looking at what their requirements will be going forward. I spoke earlier about the needs for groups like residents' associations to be involved. Clearly, all the members of the residents' associations can come to any of the other events if they wish. But I will be wanting to get from residents' association any of the local issues that are specific to their area that might otherwise get forgotten. And then perhaps the biggest highways issue for us all in Farnham is the A31 or the Farnham bypass, and we need to address those issues. Hickley's Corner is a project that perhaps we'll do most of that, but we need to know all of the needs first. Now, what I'd like to do now is to look a bit deeper at a couple of those, and I've invited to join me Paula Dunsmore, a town councillor representing Recklesham and Rowledge, and Dan Hunt, a Waverley councillor who represents Webburn and Badshot Lee, to join me. First of all, Paula, and then we'll move on to Dan. Paula, please.
Good evening and hello everyone. I'm Paula Dunsmore, councillor on the town, representing Recklesham and Rowledge. Obviously, the A325 is very dear to my heart. I live quite close to the road and have seen the impact and the issues on this particular road. Having given interviews and lots of couple of public meetings, I have great concerns and I want to make sure this road stays on this project and that actually we do have a result. I'm going to be helping and supporting the liaison groups and asking the public to come forward and come forward with their support as well on this and other areas in Farnham. We had a great response 2 years ago to a major road network consultation, and I'm sure not everyone will have read the report, but we got a mention in that because it's overwhelming the issues and the problems we have on that particular stretch of road, and we're knowing all the development that's going forward. So we really need to make sure that this stays on board. I am concerned about timescales, but we need the public be supporting us, and we need the councils all supporting us. And it is about the public speaking and for getting this to go forward. There are a number of processes and documents to be prepared, sadly, but this is about the Recklesham and the impact of that on Farnham and Rowledge and the surrounding areas. So here this evening, not answering many questions, but I'm sure there'll be more coming out of this. This is a big task, and I think there are some great people here and some brilliant enthusiasm to get something going, and hopefully it's all the right positive things. I'll hand over back to Wyatt.
Well, thank you, Paula, and it's nice to see your enthusiasm for that particular issue. Let's move on to Dan.
Yeah, good evening. So my name is Daniel Hunt, and I currently represent Webber & Badshot Lee on Waverley Borough Council for the Liberal Democrats since May last year. And for context, my family are pretty relative newcomers really to Farnham. We have 2 daughters at William Cobbett, and we've been here about 5 years, so we're still pretty new to the area in comparison to a lot of the people on the call, I expect. But we really love living here, and we're really keen to contribute to where our daughters will ultimately grow up. So I think in respect of input from a younger generation, so to speak, this was mentioned as a 25-year project, I believe, and certainly our transport needs, not just in the town centre, but in each of the wards as well, will be very different in 25 years, and clearly have some urgent issues that need to be addressed as well. In particular, as has been mentioned, taking into account climate change and the growth of online retail for a start in respect of the town centre in particular. So, you know, as a young parent, relatively young parent, I feel very strongly that when an opportunity comes up for significant changes to occur on an issue that affects everybody that lives in Farnham, that the young should have a real opportunity to have a say on what their requirements are and are listened to and taken seriously, especially when what happens now and in the next few years on this project will impact them directly in the future. And as an aside, my career for the last 20 years has been leading graduate hiring for a number of large global organizations across Europe. And I know that young people are certainly not lacking in opinions or knowledge and have got very good ideas that others may not have thought of and are sometimes reluctant to listen to. So this seems to me to be a real opportunity for parents of young children and all groups of young people who live in Farnham to get engaged and really have a voice and be able to voice their needs and help shape their environment for the long-term future. Whether that, you know, that's for cleaner public transport, the reduction of cars, you know, or widening pavements next to schools and slowing down traffic. So I really hope that through the course of this process, anyone that could be considered to be younger, I guess, in the area, you know, will sort of get engaged and you know, have a voice and put some input. And pass back to Wyatt.
Thanks, Dan. That was great. I'm sure you've got across the message there that we're really wanting all age groups to be represented in the way going forward in the analysis. You mentioned it's a 25-year project. dates for these different events will come out soon. You know, if there's sufficient response on something, we'll perhaps add to it. But the important thing is that for all of you, for the events, for the topics that you're interested in or involved in, just please be there and express your views. We'll capture them, and the project team can then get their professionals to do the analysis. It's not just a question of someone like me hobbling out into the road and thinking, ooh, I think it'd be a good idea for a bypass or a crossing here or there. Up on the screen, you'll have seen that we've now got a LLF consultation Q&A, which I'll attempt to handle some of the questions on, but I'm also looking for some help from my colleagues. Any questions?
Wyatt, just before you carry on, can I just clarify that our current programme actually spans over 15 years? That's based on the current timelines advertised by government on the funding that we need to apply to, and the periods that it would take various government organisations to actually assess our fund and then provide a response, and also around the statutory timelines for planning and other aspects we have to go through. So currently our programme is 15 years, not 25 years, but that will of course develop as the programme extends. So I thought I'd just clarify that. It helps a little bit.
Paul, it certainly helps. I had wondered myself at the introduction of a 25-year time frame. I guess the consequences will be at least 25 years, but 15 years is the funding and the necessary for the project to get things done in. So thank you very much.
Cheers.
Andy, I'm looking to you, please. If there's any questions that have already come up that we should be seeking to answer
I've been looking through the questions, the open questions, Wyatt, and I can't see any specifically about the the LLF, how that's going forward. If anyone wants to put in questions like that, please do. And
well, there was one that came up earlier, which was how will the residents' associations?
Yes, can I just put that one in, Wyatt? So we had a written question from Sophia. The SOFRA, the South Farnham Residents Association, had asked the question: will we be consulting with residents' associations? I think you've answered that within your presentation. The answer is yes, we are. We are consulting with all those organisations. We will consult with anybody that comes forward. We sometimes don't know what we don't know. So, you know, apologies now if we miss people, but the intention is that we will consult with all tenants, all residents' associations.
Thank you, Chris. And I think we also had a question came up from a Michael Hopkins, who was asking about the town centre. And Michael, I tried in my answer to you to recognise that we do have a potential conflict between what a cyclist is trying to do in a space, a pedestrian is trying to, the motorist wants as much space as possible to get past. And it's that in one of the first of the events, or at least the numbered one event, we'll be trying to look at that divergence or issues and concerns and see what common ground we can find. Please be there. And if there's nothing else, then I'm very happy that we move on to the general Q&A.
I think we should, Wyatt, but people can still put in questions to Wyatt if they wish to, or Dan or Paula. Yeah, let's move on to the general questions section. A whole load of the questions that people have put in through the chat box have already been answered. I see that 75 have been answered. And I noticed that my colleague Stephen Spence has answered a few. And I wouldn't like to finish this session without giving Stephen the opportunity to say something, particularly about the Upper Hale Road and HGV vehicles. He's answered one or two already by text, but now's your chance to say something, Stephen, about in response to any questions you've been answered or any points you want to make about HGVs and the Upper Hale Road. Please do.
Thanks, Andy. I'm just involved in a little debate about whether cars going slower is a good thing or a bad thing, which I do think it is a good thing for 20 miles an hour. And it doesn't mean cars are evil if they go at 20 miles an hour. It just means it's better. So in the Upper Hill Road and on Folly Hill in the centre, I want to see the trucks banned, and I want to see them banned now. I have a lively debate with Chris. I believe we can do it now. I think we're being overly cautious about banning them. Not the ones that deliver, not the ones that are, are under 7.5 tons, but the ones that are coming through the centre of the town and down the Upper Hill Road and down Folly Hill, because their sat-navs tell them it's a bit quicker. And we say we have to look at where they'll go. Well, we'll know where they'll go. They'll go on the M3, the A3, the A331, and the A31, which is where they should go. So the sooner we can get round to banning extraneous trucks, like the big car transporters that go through the COVID system in the centre of town, the happier I will be. And to make sure that car transporter doesn't go on the Upper Hill Road, I want them banned there as well. I think this project is a very positive thing. For, I don't know how many, 50, 70 years, reports have been written and nothing's been done. We now have this initiative. This is going to be the biggest thing since the bypass, in my view. And I think community people being involved and community people pushing and community people, giving their views, like this little debate I'm currently involved in, is absolutely important. Whatever side of the debate we are, if we can get some kind of consensus together, that will be good.
Thanks very much, Stephen. I'd like to give Paul Follows, he's the other council member of the board who hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet. And I think Paul has been answering one or two questions as well. So you come in and have your say, Paul, and any points you want to make in response to the questions you've been asked.
Thank you, Andy, for the opportunity. I will just very quickly say, as the comms portfolio holder for Waverley as well, the questions I'm trying to answer are those about comms and engagement. And I just want to give some reassurance that we will be trying to maximise not only the amount of comms and engagement we do, but also the types. And at the moment, we are a little bit limited by the current COVID regulations, because they prevent us having sort of more than sort of Zoom meetings and creative online versions. But in time, the intent is to have a full comms plan that starts to address this, and that it goes down to engagement with all the different types and demographics that have been discussed. Just been having a discussion with a young mother wanting to talk about engagement with schools, which I think is a great idea, and also about just young people in general and how they use the town centre and how they use the wider Farnham area. The other point that's come up from a comms perspective that I've been noticing is people wanting to ensure that the wider Farnham parishes and people who live outside the town centre get properly consulted, because obviously Farnham isn't just about the town centre, it's about including all of those people. And I want to give some reassurance that all of us here recognise that, and we'll make sure that all of Farnham is properly engaged, not just those who live within the town centre area. So anyway, thank you very much for giving the opportunity, Andy, and I'll continue to answer any questions on this that I'm seeing in the Q&A.
Thanks, Paul. I think back to you in the sense now, Chris, that you have some other questions that were sent in advance that you might want to respond to, and then we'll look at the outstanding one in the Q&A box in a minute once you've picked up one of the ones that were emailed in.
Chris, before Chris comes in, Andy, can I just interject slightly, because I think and Stephen picked up my point, but I earwigged one of his questions on Upper Howell Road to answer live, because I think he's right. Upper Howell Road must be considered, and all of that area must be considered, and that's why the approach to this. I know Stephen wants it done tomorrow, and we'll continue that conversation with him. But actually, the consequences of everything we do, not just the trucks, but the unintended consequences of everything we do must be considered to make sure we don't move one problem from one place to another. Stephen will keep pushing us to get this delivered. I wanted to pick up on something else that Jeremy said in his introduction, which I thought is really important. We will not please all the people all the time. The outcomes for this will be measured. They will be evidence-based. You may not get everything that everybody wants, and we all need to make sacrifices. We all need to just move our goalposts and measure our outcomes that we are looking for, and our dreams that we are outcome for Farnham, and actually make sure we get something that fits all people and helps all people, whether you are a disabled, pedestrian, cyclist, mother, business, whatever group you are in, we must help as many across the board as we can, as much as possible. But it will not be a one-size-fits-all, and I know we're going to probably upset some people along the road. And I just wanted to put that other point in. But yes, you're absolutely right. Geraldine, who asked the question on there, and I earmarked before Stephen could get in, that we must consider all areas, and the Up Howe Road, as Stephen will tell you, is close to my heart because he keeps reminding me.
Thanks very much for that, Colin. Yeah, there are loads of people in Farnham got strong opinions, and obviously at the end of the day, we want public support for this project. But it'll never be what I want or what Stephen wants or what any individual wants. It'll have to be a consensus thing eventually. But it has to be something, whatever the outcome is, it's got to have public support overall. That doesn't mean every one of us will agree with everything that happens. That's just impossible. Very good point, Colin. So can I pass back to Chris now to pick up on one or two of the questions that were sent in advance?
Thanks for that, Andy. And just to assure Stephen and re-emphasise what Colin says, that's why we are looking across the board. I mean, some of the comments have been coming back in about HGVs. You will just move them around somewhere else, i.e. up a hill. That is not the intention. But it's like a lot of things. When Stephen says now, I'm sure he doesn't mean tomorrow morning, or you might do, Stephen. But we have a process that we have to follow. It is a legal process, because if you don't do it legally, you can't enforce it. If you can't enforce it, they just basically do the normal finger sign to people. So it's not about, I am not about a process that takes an age. I'm about a process that's quick, but quick, haste, less speed, possibly is the analogy. But we are looking at that, and we're looking across Farnham as a whole, not just the town centre for HGVs. So a couple of, some of the questions that I haven't answered. And one of the questions that's coming from Colin, it's about solutions to reduce pollution and require all distribution vehicles to have Euro 6 engines. Again, similar to the London scheme, yes, I mean, that's something we can look at. There are other measures that we could do. The first is, of course, and you do say distribution vehicles, Colin, so these are the ones that we have to allow into the town centre. But we could look at other issues. We could look at freight logistics centre, and we could look then at offloading them at a centre somewhere adjacent to Farnham and then bulking them up into smaller vehicles, electric vehicles, cargo bikes. I'm not saying that's what we will do. I'm just saying that's what we could look at. So there are all other things that we could look at, but yes, obviously we'll look at the Euro 6. Talk about the buses. We've actually made a bid to government for Farnham to be an all-electric bus town. So that's something that we're working through now. So that bid's in, we're waiting to hear from it. So that will mean all the buses in Farnham will be electric, even better than what Colin's suggesting, because they will be non-polluting. Bear in mind, of course, electric vehicles are great. They still pollute. They still cause congestion. And they still cause accidents. It's just one element, but we are looking at that. And we will talk, every authority is looking at its own fleet to move to electric. A really good one that Colin had put in was vehicles waiting at Farnham train crossing and turn their engines off. We can certainly do an advisory, but can we do an actual regulatory one where people can be fined if they don't do it? Because sometimes, unfortunately, life has it that people need a stick as well. So that's something we can look at, and electric vehicles through county depots we've looked at. Interesting one, extend the green light time for each direction on the A31 station crossing. Well, that's at the expense of someone else, because the longer you extend the green time, the greater the delay for someone else, because there's only so many minutes in an hour and so many hours in a day. So not saying no, and it is something we're looking at for cyclists as part of this Farnham bid. and then it goes on about freight companies. Next question again from Colin, that there are people with experience in Farnham and they will be willing to help and even provide their time free. I am a Yorkshireman. Anybody that provides anything for free, I'm into. So more than happy, and we are already talking, as I mentioned earlier. So please, to all the stakeholders that are doing the same sort of thing. The cycle campaign, for example, have provided free time into the bid. Great, thank you, we will take it. Just contact us. Easier for disabled people to access the town centre. Really sad, Emma is saying she doesn't come into Farnham because she can't access it, narrow footways, poor quality, drop crossings. Paramount. Accessibility has got to be paramount with everything that we do. And I hope, Emma, when we get the town centre something like, and we're looking at the COVID measures now to try and improve on those because they look a bit like roadworks, I accept that. So we are looking to do something better than that at the minute. So I hope when we get well into this programme in the next year or so, you will be able to come back in the town centre, because that's what we need, people back into the town centre. Mentioned earlier, Simon had raised the issue about has the group got power, has it decision making? I've answered that one, hopefully. The answer is, you've seen the people here, you can't get better teeth than that. Just a little analogy, talking about shared space. Again, the government have put a stop on shared space. They issued an edict about 12 months ago. I pushed this letter back to members of the board, some members of the board that raised it, and that didn't stop them because they have friends that are in higher places than I am. And so apparently DFT are looking at that because Farnham wants to relook at the possibility. If that isn't teeth, I don't know what is. In terms of Woolmead and Brightwell's development, we are talking to Crest Nicholson about Brightwell's. There's been a few questions about that and what they're proposing to do on East Street and Royal Deer. We are asking them to defer those works, to tie those works into what we're doing. We will look to do some works because we need to get the setting of the development right, and we need to get the connectivity definitely right. So we will be looking for some works, but hopefully we can convince them as part of the planning, working with Waverley, planning approval, that we can defer those works and actually tie them into the overall works within the town centre. That will not mean leaving it as a building site. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I can say the same about Woolmead. That is with Waverley. They have made a planning application recently or to amend it, and that is something that's going through. So it's not within our gift or remit, isn't that? In terms of, there has been a question about car speeding, and there's different views about this. I mentioned about 20 mile per hour. I've had a question about Castle Hill. Should we extend that? People want it, people don't want it. Some people would say you can't travel any faster than 20 mile per hour through Farnham anyway. But if you can't, then it doesn't harm, does it? Because you will be able to travel through Farnham at more than 20 mile per hour at some time in the day. And if you're the unlucky pedestrian that walks in the way of that vehicle, then you'll know about it. 20 mile per hour reduces the impact of injury quite significantly as opposed to 30 mile an hour. So it loses nothing. I accept in some instances they're probably already doing that. Ironically, the rules are that they've got to be travelling close to 20 mile per hour to put a 20 mile per hour speed limit in, or you have to put other measures in to ensure they do go nearer to 20 mile per hour. Feasibility study for Hickley's Corner, I've mentioned that. We are reviewing that. We're not dropping it, but we're re-looking at it. Recklesham Bypass, Western Bypass, it's on the table. It's not gone away. We will look at it. Whether or not from the point of view that it will meet the government objectives, that's a different issue. But we're not taking it off the table. It is there. Traffic light improvement at Badshot Lee. Sorry, I've got to come back on that one. I know there is discussion going on. We will answer that fully. I haven't got an answer for you now. It's not gone away. It has recently been raised by board members, but I haven't got you an answer, and I'll give you a full answer coming back. That's one that from Cliff. Viola, application for a new waste treatment site, the other side of the border. Yes, we're aware of it. We've been asked, can we object? Surrey County Council object. That is not within my gift or remit. It's not within the board's remit, but we will accommodate it, and we are aware of it. And we do talk to our development control people. So I can't say categorically we would object. I can't even say we would object, but we are aware of it, and we will, whatever happens, we will accommodate it. Traffic entering, oh, this is interesting. This is about merging. In Germany, there's a system, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but there's a merging system where cars merge alternatively. So this idea comes from Castle Street, merging into the borough, and cars coming along West Street into the borough. We'll look at it. More than happy to look at it. Whether we can actually do it and regulate it for it, and it's a different issue. I mean, just to give you an idea, the states and a number of countries allow merging traffic even where there's lights. If you can merge, even if the right lights at red, we can't do it here. And if someone tries to do it and has an accident, they're at fault. So we will look at it and see what we can do there. So that's an interesting one. Farnham Sports Council, looking at the parks and sports grounds, we want to encourage active travel. So the one thing we will do, we can't promise they're going to be there forever, because that's not within our remit either. And that's not to say there's any thoughts that there'll be anything else. But we will link it with any active travel that we do. Another question about HGVs. Castle Street is one of the widest streets with any form of without pedestrian crossing. Well, pedestrians and cyclists will be fully considered with everything that we do. Just an aside on that, everybody looks towards Holland, the Netherlands, as to cycling, and they have a different concept over there. They have a concept of vulnerability. So if you're hit and you are the more vulnerable party, the assumption is the other party is at fault. Now that may not always be the case. Kiddie that runs out into a road, pedestrian that walks across the road without looking. The presumption isn't always that the car driver is at fault. However, the government are now announcing that they are going to look at that as part of the new cycling initiative, that actually the more vulnerable you are, the more the onus of fault will be on the driver or whatever hits you. That's a pedestrian to a cyclist, it'll be the pedestrian that's more vulnerable. Cyclist to a car, it'll be the cyclist that's more vulnerable. So it is changing, is that, and that's really interesting. That is a fundamental change to how we approach liability within the country. So that's good, is that. And then I think finally, the question I've got is about increased car traffic levels. I suppose the flippant answer is, and this is Brightwells, the flippant answer is, of course we want to encourage more people in. That's the whole idea, is to make the centre more vibrant. And those have been loads of issues around Brightwells. Increased car levels, if there were, and I can't categorically say there were, that they did forecast increased car levels, but the proposals they came up with were to accommodate those. So the county would have put proposals in, and part of the agreement with Crest Nicholson was for works on the highway, East Street and Royal Deer being one of them, some on South Street, Dog Flood as well. So I can't answer the question outright, but it would have been dealt with as part of the application. And we do see active travel linking Brightwells, the Brightwell development. So one of the things on this cycling bid is it actually goes round. I know the cycling lobby wanted us to go straight down South Street, but it was about going round we couldn't do that at this stage, unfortunately. We hopefully can do in the future, but it does, the cycling route, which comes from the north and links the station, puts Toucan crossings, which is for cyclists, across the A31. It does link the Brightwells development more, and we will also have a, from the Dogflood car park, the Walk and Stride, there's a link in from that as well. So we will definitely be linking in. And then a final one talks about e-bikes. Yeah, we're more than happy to look at looking at bike rental, looking at e-bikes, maybe even e-scooters. They're allowed now. A lot of people, particularly young people, I can't see myself on an e-scooter. I've got an e-bike. I need it now, my age. But e-scooters as well. So hopefully that's a very quick run through. What we'll try and do, Andy, is make sure all these questions and all these answers are collated into one place that people can see them. And it will form, if you like, a question and answer part for what we're doing with the infrastructure programme. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. That's great. I see, looking at the Q&A box, there's 107 questions been answered by somebody, which would have been one of the panelists. And there's 11 open questions, some of which are quite difficult questions, not addressed to any particular person. So I think we should go through them and see if we can actually answer them. The first couple of questions are very much along the same lines from Jennifer Rains and from Colin Sheehan about housing. Is the amount of housing development, to summarise them, in Farnham going to make the situation worse, and what can we be doing about it? One, rather unfairly, was specifically directed at Jeremy. So I'm afraid I will ask Jeremy to say something about that, because we're in the situation where the government sees building new houses as extremely important. And we all see that as important, and we all want housing for the young people, etc. We all want house prices to come down, but we want housing in the right place, and we are concerned where there's not enough infrastructure provided. And I guess that's the thing behind these questions. If we get a lot more housing and we don't get enough infrastructure, is this going to make the thing worse? So rather unfairly, Jeremy, I'm going to ask you if you maybe comment on that, if you wouldn't mind, because it's your government, it's Boris, that's talking about build, build, build. And I'm not asking you to speak on his behalf, but let's have your comments on it, Jeremy.
Well, thank you, Andy. I mean, I'm still trying to understand the extent to which those comments will have an impact on towns like Farnham and areas like southwest Surrey, where 85% of the land is areas of outstanding natural beauty, which he specifically excluded. My own view is that the mood amongst local residents has really changed very dramatically in the last 10 years, from being outright hostility to all development to understanding the need for young people to be able to stay in the area by getting a foot on the housing ladder. But I personally feel that our planning system is bust. I don't think it works at all well. And I think the answer is to say to local areas, look, you have to take responsibility for building your share of new houses, but you should have the say as to where they go and the style of those houses, so that they are consistent with what happens locally, and therefore the ability to make sure the local infrastructure should cope. So my way to solve this conundrum has always been much more devolution of power to the most local possible levels. So I think Farnham's actually been a beacon on that, with the way the neighbourhood plan was very skillfully put together and supported by Carol Coburn. But I think we need to go a lot further so that people actually feel they have control over the development of their own town.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. I agree with you that the planning system is bust, actually, and hopefully the government will come to realise that and change it. Next question that hasn't been answered is from Peter Goodman, who of course is for the Farnham cycling campaign. His question is, what are your project timescales for project 1 and 2? I guess I have to put that to Chris and Paula to pick up on. What do we see as the project timescales for project 1 and 2?
Okay, If I could just also adding to the first two questions that Jeremy's just dealt with, the answer from a technical point of view, once the approval's given, the approval's given. That's not within our remit. It would never be in our remit. But we would accommodate that. I know that's probably not the answer that people are expecting, but we would be aware of the volumes. We would be aware of the impacts. Whatever we come up with, proposals would accommodate that. As I say, probably not what people want to hear, but that's how we would deal with it. In terms of the timescales for Project 1, well, the quick wins are underway. So we have already commissioned Atkins for the 20 mile per hour, the HGV. We've got some bids into government, the electric bus bid, getting, as Peter knows, we're getting the bid in for the tranche 2 active travel. So they are imminent. And that tranche 2 active travel, you know, another moan, we all moan about someone. Central government are looking to award that. We've got to put it in by the 7th, this Friday, and they're looking to award, and we've got to spend by the end of this financial year. So that means 6 months, which is tight to say the least. So some of those are imminent. What I will do with HGVs, because I think it's useful for people to be aware, one of the things I will ask for is a layout of the process. And rest assured, I will challenge the process. But there are set timescales for advertising. There are set timescales for objections. There are set ways that objections have to be dealt with, all of which take time, and it's regulatory. There is no way around that. We can put advisory on, we can do things like that, but advisory means absolutely nothing if you want to try and enforce it. So they are very imminent. But Paula, do you want to just try and add some something to the Project 2 and any more on Project 1?
Yeah, on Project 1, I wanted to say that we are looking at sort of, we've identified routes to get going, and I would suggest that the timescales are around 3 months for our first quick wins to emerge, and that is really around meeting statutory guidelines, raising TORs legitimately to make sure that what we are putting in place doesn't have these unintended consequences, and has thought about, for example, the 20 mile per hour has been raised in questions extensively. You know, we're going to be assessing the impact of that, both from an environmental perspective and the transport planning perspective, before we actually put that in, and the impact of queues as a result of that. So 3 to 6 months, I would say, for that. And in terms of the town centre, our first big milestone, as requested by Jeremy, is to put an optimised infrastructure plan together for beginning of new year, so end of December, January, and that will basically show what is the walking and cycling infrastructure look like, where are we changing junctions, widening, pedestrianising, what are the various options. And then after that, using those options, we will go to formal public consultations. This will be advertised by our consultants, Atkins, and they will be set up, and everybody will be invited to come and view the options and share their thoughts before they're taken forward in design.
Thanks, Paula. Next question, Chris, is again aimed at you from Chris Shepherd. And it's basically saying that you had commented that it takes a while to get the legal framework for bringing in restrictions. And his point is, how about actually enforcing the restrictions we already have, which is a bit of a problem if you don't have enough police around the place.
It is a good point. So yeah, there are 2 ways we can enforce. Previously, people were seeing traffic wardens, and traffic wardens were part of the police force. We can now do civil enforcement in terms of enforcing yellow lines in terms of we can do camera enforcement of bus lanes. There are powers to do camera enforcement of other moving traffic light violations like yellow boxes and things like that, but they're only in London at the moment, although again the government are looking to expand those out. Their concern, which is understandable, is that they see them as just money raising issues for local authorities. There's one box junction in London that generates about £1 million a year. I wish we could have a few of those, but I'm not sure Farnham will be very keen on having one of those. Bit of a flippant response, sorry about that, but it is down, the rest of it is down to the police. So in terms of HGVs, in terms of 20-mile-per-hour speed limits, that is definitely with the police. And we are talking to the police. We have contact as well with the Police and Crime Commissioner, David Munro. So yes, it is a good point to make and a very valid point, and it is something that we do need to ensure, because as is rightly pointed out, there's no point in putting more in if you can't even enforce the ones you've got.
Thanks, Chris. The next question from Paul Hopkins, a very specific one about a suggestion to remove the traffic lights at the junction of Victoria Road and South Street and replace them as it used to be with a pedestrian crossing. I think that's something we'd have to look at outside this meeting, but we'll look at that suggestion and see if it's a good idea. Next thing is more of a comment than a question from David Howell, pointing out that traffic goes northward in Castle Street at 40 miles an hour, even when it's stationary southbound. That's true. We get lots of complaints from people in Castle Street about speeding traffic, particularly going north, actually. So that's a good comment. And next question is from Pepe Dad about the proposed incinerator, the Viola incinerator just across the border in Hampshire. Now, what does that actually say? It's suggesting.
So it's our report. It's our response, Colin. I think it's a response I made. Vehicle impact and needs to address issues such as. Well, yes, it does, but quite honestly, that sorry. It isn't our remit, isn't that? That's something that Hampshire's got to deal with, and Hampshire are dealing with it. So the impact is actually on our network, and that's the thing that we would respond on. And of course, as adjacent planning authority, I'm sure Waverley would respond as well. We've all got our own recycling rates and government requirements, and they are there, they're a fact. And it's not for us to determine, if I'm reading this right from you, Colin, it's not for us to determine whether their recycling rates and government requirements are something for us to comment on.
I'll just comment briefly, Chris, that Farnham Town Council will be objecting strongly, Waverley Borough Council will be objecting strongly, and Jeremy Hunt has objected strongly. So they're going to get plenty of objections. We're all a little bit disappointed in what Surrey has said. I'll make that point. I don't know if Colin's still with us.
Can I clarify that? Are you saying, sorry, I should know the question. Are you saying we have responded in terms of traffic?
I think there's been a response from Surrey Highways saying that they didn't see a particular problem. I think lots of people in Farnham see a big problem, actually.
Let me look into that and just see what has been said. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, that sort of thing is not within our remit. The thing that might be is the massive increase, if we get a massive increase, and we will make comment. And I know that we did mention to Richard Cooper, who's at County, that obviously we had an interest in the impact of that, but I haven't seen the response. So apologies, I'll look at the response, and if there's anything else I can add, I will do.
Thanks, Chris. The next question from Clifford Jones is, I'll make it clear to the audience, by the way, that you only see questions, your own questions, and questions that are answered. So I'm picking up all the questions that haven't been answered at the moment. From Clifford Jones, he says, when did the electric bid go in, and when will we know the outcome, I guess?
It is imminent. I can't give you an exact date. If you just go on to the next one, I did get an email. Memory's not as good as it used to be. Let me just see if I can find the email. It did give me an idea when the date was, and I'll come back on that.
Okay. Then the next question, more of a comment supporting Paul Hopkins' suggestion about the traffic lights. It's from Michael Hopkins, actually. I don't know if they're actually related, but it's a supportive comment on the previous suggestion that I read out earlier. Question for Katonia K. Hunt. On the subject of traffic merging, why has the top of Downing Street been given the white lines? Traffic merging from the right gets priority in this country, and traffic from West Street should be paused to give way, particularly as it can cope with tailback and doesn't gridlock the one-way system. I guess that's something we need to look at, actually, Chris, in terms of the way that that has been implemented.
Yeah, we're happy to look at that. Just coming back on the other one, Andy,
yeah.
Government had said that it was going to be late summer. The full thoughts were probably September, because ministers like to announce things and Parliament will be in recess. So realistically, probably early September we will hear.
Okay. The next question is again about the Alton incinerator from Colin Sheehan. He's saying it needs to address issues such as recycling rates and government requirements to be net neutral by 2050. It's not really, as you said, Chris, something for your project to be dealing with, but we will take that question on board as councillors and
yeah.
look at it. Next question from David Johnson. It's clearly encouraging to see and hear the unity of purpose. Has it been noted there are long-term and intractable issues? Can we get a sense of timing of the deliverables to monitor the performance of the project board? Could we see some clear timescales for the key elements of the plan? I think we've partially answered that already, but do you want to say any more about that, either Chris or Paula?
We've got a program, Andy, and that program will go live as part of our blueprint to deliver the program, and we are measuring ourselves as a KPI in terms of how we are delivering against this. The program will be revised as we go forward and uncover information, etc. But we will be sharing our progress with the public as part of these LLFs and publish them. There is hopefully going to be a project website where all of the sort of information around timescales and different projects and details of each project can be found.
Okay, thanks for that, Paula. And next question from Paul Hoskins says, can you give an honest answer, please? I will certainly try. Will the cones be removed to allow better traffic flow in Farnham, or is COVID an excuse, it says in brackets, as per Mark Furness, to impede traffic further? Well, I don't actually think we're trying to impede the traffic, actually. The COVID stuff was done really on instruction from the government to provide social distancing on the pavements. And we've had actually a lot of people very supportive of that, but some people pretty critical of the fact that Central Farnham looked like a traffic, traffic works and nothing else. I guess the good news is I can say, because I've spoken to Matt Furness about this just yesterday, is that the traffic cones and the barriers are due to disappear within the next few weeks. It could take up to about 6 weeks and be replaced by what are called temporary traffic curbs, which will look a lot neater, and they will sit between the planters that have been installed and further will be installed. So within 6 to 8 weeks, we'll certainly look for the thing to be looking a lot better than it is. And it will prove to be a good trial for us of widening pavements and narrowing traffic in Farnham. I've found myself as I drive through the town, at most times that you don't get held up. But when the gasworks is really doing something in South Street or one of the other roads, it totally holds everything up. I have to say that we had no choice, I'm afraid, about the gasworks. That's seen as a safety issue. the people responsible for monitoring the gas companies had declared that our local gas company had to replace the gas main this year, and as a safety issue, so it had to be done. And that obviously has caused a lot of inconvenience. But it's one of these utility things that we've got no choice about. But that'll all be finished within the next month or two. The other good news, if you like, one of the few benefits of COVID is that the Chris Nicholson scheme, the Brightwell scheme, obviously has got to be put back now. Chris lost about 3 to 4 months' work. They're now working under social distancing conditions, which means they can only work at something like 80% of their previous productivity. The scheme was used to open in the spring of next year, which would have been around about April. The earliest that will now open will be in the autumn, round about September. Now that actually means that the work that Crest were due to do in the roads, which was due to start around about October, that can now be put back to early next year, and possibly, as Chris has mentioned, integrated with this, the project work being done in this project. So a fortunate thing is we won't have all this roadworks caused by, you know, the Brightwells project later this year, which would have further gridlocked the time in the period leading up to Christmas. That won't happen now till after Christmas, which I know many of the retailers are very thankful, because the retailers, as we know, are all suffering due to COVID, etc. So the next questions, I think we've dealt with that one already. Colin Shane, that's another question about the incinerator. A question from Paul Hopkins. He seems to be asking a lot of questions. It's just disappeared. Sorry, Chris, you come in. It's just disappeared off my screen.
Right. Andy, can I just add, there's been a few questions coming back where I've used, I should have learned over all these years that you've got to use your words carefully, because people can and will read them in certain ways, understandably. And when I said accommodate, what I mean is, if anything's given a planning application, and I've been on the reverse of this before, we will automatically take that into account. We condone absolutely nothing. We don't do accommodation works to facilitate planning or anything like that. All we do is make sure, if they have planning approval, that we make sure that if we're doing something within the network, we take account of that. So there was a question from Pepe saying, does that mean I condone it? No, of course it doesn't mean I condone it. What it means is, if after it's gone through its planning process, if it is given planning approval, and I'm not saying one way or another, then we will look to ensure that whatever we do, even, you know, I accept people won't like it, but we will look to ensure that whatever we do takes account of that. Well, that's only where there are planning approvals or potential planning approvals or potential development proposals that are in the local plans and so on. And hopefully people wouldn't expect us to do anything else, that they wouldn't expect us not to take notice of what is going to happen. And I accept what I might have said might have given the impression that we're accepting what might happen, and that's not the case. We're alive to it. If it's given planning approval, we will have to take notice of that. We can't ignore it.
Thanks, Chris. I think actually, in the interest of you know, finishing roughly when we said we would, I think we'll finish with the questions now, actually, but any unanswered questions will be answered later, actually. I'll just say, before I pass over to Pat Evans, Mayor of Farnham, to conclude the meeting, that I'm reasonably happy with how this has gone. I was a little bit terrified that having sat through some of these meetings as a participant and seeing the chairman suddenly being disconnected, which can happen, and it's happened to John Ward in chairing council meetings at Waverley. I know that John's complained to BP Openreach about the number of disconnections we're getting in Farnham, and it looks as if it might have some effect, actually, because fortunately we haven't had any on this occasion. I was also worried about things like the doorbell suddenly going, the dog starting barking and so on. And that's the sort of thing you get with this type of technology, but fortunately none of that happens either. So I'm broadly happy with how it's gone. I think we've met most of our objectives. I hope we've done something towards the final objective I stated of gaining goodwill for this project and got across how important it is for us all that this project works. So hopefully that's been achieved. So I'll say no more now other than to pass over to Pat Evans as the Mayor of Farnham to close the meeting. So thank you very much for everybody who attended. Thank you for your participation and your questions. So over to you now, Pat.
Thank you very much, Andy. When I first asked for the agenda for this evening, the closure was down to me and it was 45 minutes. It's actually 5 minutes, so feel relieved about that. I'm the Mayor of Farnham, which is a civic post, but I'm an elected councillor. I'm in my second year as Mayor because of the COVID situation. But my theme for my mayoralty is to work with the community, for the community. And I think that that is precisely what is happening. However, I do come with a past, and it might be of interest to know that, in fact, I was a local government officer and I was the town clerk for Farnham from 2000, when I was looking for a Millennium Challenge, which indeed I got. And in 2002, as town clerk, I was involved with the Hickler's Corner proposals at that time. When I retired, I was persuaded after a number of years to come back as an independent councillor. And I said that I would endeavour to address ongoing concerns, including road and environmental issues. And again, I feel that that's part of my remit. I might not be a member of the board, but I'm in close contact with everything that's going on and I have a real focus and interest. My job here this evening is to close the meeting. So I want to thank everyone who's joined us this evening on this webinar. We're living through exceptional times, and part of this is a new approach to public consultation. This evening has been the first public consultation conducted here in Farnham virtually on an issue which is so important to the town, namely the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. Everything, you know, has a name and then it goes down to initials, and I find myself all the time wondering, what was that initial for? This evening we've heard about the programme's vision and its themes and the intended outcomes from very eloquent speakers, and I congratulate them all on the presentations which they've made. I'm very grateful to them, but incredibly grateful to the members of the public who have joined us and expressed their concerns, their questions, and which I hope we've been able to answer satisfactorily. And if there's anything that's outstanding, we will come back to you, be assured. This is the start of a lengthy process, and it is of great importance that our community is an integral part of that process. The plan is to hold more local liaison forum, that's LLF meetings, for key stakeholder groups. This is only the first of these meetings. You might not, as members of the public, have agreed with some of the views presented this evening. Please let us know your views and then they will be addressed. Farnham is a very special place. It's our home, I moved with my family to Farnham in 1984, a long time ago. It's our home, our workplace, and where our children are educated and they grow up, and much more. We want to achieve the best we can for as many people as possible, and transport improvements are the key. We look forward to working together with you to achieve this. Thank you to everyone who has participated for their involvement. We hope the community will become increasingly involved, and we look forward to hearing from you, the community. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Pat. The meeting is now closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.